My son, my only child, thought he could erase me with a text message. He believed that after 67 years on this earth, after building an empire from a single textile mill my father left me, I could be dismissed like a bothersome notification on a screen. He was wrong. In the 24 hours that followed his cold, callous declaration, one phone call was all it took to begin the demolition of the life he'd stolen, the empire he so arrogantly believed was his birthright. He wanted to cut ties. So, I decided to cut his lifeline instead. This is the story of how a mother's love, when pushed past its limit, can forge itself into the sharpest weapon of all. If you're watching this right now, I'd be so grateful if you hit that subscribe button. Before we get into the heart of this, I'm curious to know where this story is reaching you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's a small world, and our stories are what connect us. The message arrived at precisely 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was in the sunroom of my Beacon Hill brownstone, a place that had always been my sanctuary. The morning light, soft and golden, streamed through the antique leaded glass, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Outside, the Boston Common was waking up. I held a cup of Earl Grey tea, its warmth a small comfort against the chill that was about to settle deep in my bones. The phone buzzed on the mahogany table beside me, a jarring modern sound in a room filled with history. It was from Ethan. My heart gave a familiar foolish little leap, the reflexive jump of a mother's hope, the one that whispers, maybe this time it's good news. Then I read the words. Mom, we've decided it's time to cut ties. Don't plan on coming to Sunday dinner anymore. I read the message once, my mind refusing to process the bluntness of it. Then a second time, a third. The words remained stark and brutal on the small screen. 35 years of motherhood. Of rocking him to sleep as a baby, of cheering the loudest at his little league games, of paying for a Harvard education that was supposed to teach him about legacy and honor. All of it, my entire life's work as his mother, dismissed with a few taps of his thumb. I watched, mesmerized by a sort of cold horror, as the notification underneath showed that everyone in the Beaumont family group chat had read the message. My sister Clara, his aunt, her husband Robert, and then Ethan's wife, my ever-charming daughter-in-law Jessica, reacted with a single devastating emoji. A laughing crying face. She was laughing at my banishment. The silence from the others was a physical thing, pressing down on me, stealing the air from my lungs. Not one person typed a word. Not a hang on Ethan, this is your mother. Or a let's all calm down and talk. Nothing. Just the cold, digital void of their complicity. In that moment a chilling clarity washed over me, extinguishing the initial searing flame of pain. It wasn't just a text message. It was a culmination. My mind flashed back 1 year. Ethan and Jess, sitting on the very chintz sofa across from me, their faces masks of cloying concern. They had suggested I grant them power of attorney over my finances. You're getting older, Mom, Ethan had said, his eyes darting around the room, unable to meet mine. We just want to make sure you're taken care of, that you're not getting forgetful. I had shut them down then, my mind as sharp and clear as it had ever been. But I hadn't forgotten. I saw their attempt for what it was, the first move in a hostile takeover of my life. This text message wasn't an emotional outburst. It was a strategic move in their long game. They were isolating me, publicly declaring me irrelevant, setting the stage to paint me as an unstable, senile old woman who couldn't be trusted. My hands were perfectly steady. The tremor in my heart did not reach my fingertips. I took a screenshot of the chat. Evidence, darling. My late husband Robert had always told me, always collect evidence. Then with a precision that felt both foreign and deeply familiar, I typed my reply. Just 2 words. Message received. I sent it. Then, I navigated to the group settings and selected Leave Group. I confirmed without a moment's hesitation. Some bridges are meant to be burned. Others you rig with dynamite and detonate from a safe distance, savoring the spectacle. Today I was in a mood for fireworks. They had no idea that I wasn't getting forgetful. For the past 3 years I had been remembering everything. Every doctored invoice, every hushed phone call, every discrepancy in the books. I hadn't been getting old. I'd been getting ready. And my arsenal was fully stocked. What was the? I refused to shed a single tear. Tears were for the woman I had been 5 minutes ago. A mother, a grandmother, a hopeful fool. The woman I was now had no time for such indulgences. Grief was a luxury and I was on a war footing. The woman who had built Beaumont Mills from her father's crumbling legacy, who had faced down bankers and union bosses in the 70s, had just been reawakened. I set my smartphone down on the table. Its sleek, modern surface, the very vessel of my dismissal, felt tainted. I turned my back on it and walked into my study, a room paneled in dark cherry wood and lined with books, real books with paper and ink and the weight of history. On the corner of my large, leather-topped desk sat an old friend. It was a vintage-style rotary telephone, heavy and black, with a satisfying heft and a dial that clicked with mechanical precision. It was a beautiful object, a relic from an era when communication had weight and permanence. It represented everything my son, with his disposable texts and fleeting loyalties, had forgotten. I picked up the heavy receiver, its familiar shape a comfort in my hand. The cool bakelite grounded me. My fingers, adorned with my grandmother's sapphire ring, found the familiar holes in the rotary dial. It was a deliberate physical act. With each turn and click of the dial, I felt my resolve hardening. I was dialing a number I had committed to memory 3 years ago, a number I had repeated to myself in the dead of night but had never before allowed my fingers to touch. It was my break glass in case of emergency plan, my nuclear option. My son had just handed me the launch codes. The phone on the other end rang twice, a crisp, professional tone that cut through the silence. A woman's voice, sharp as a shard of glass, answered with a single clipped word. "Vance." "Sterling, it's Catherine Beaumont," I said. My voice was calm, a placid lake over a churning abyss. "It's time." There was a beat of silence on the line, not of surprise, but of quiet, focused acknowledgement. Then a low, knowing laugh echoed down the line, a sound that was less about humor and more about the deep satisfaction of a long-held prediction coming true. It was the sound of a predator recognizing the scent of blood in the wind. "Catherine," Sterling Vance said, her voice laced with a dangerous, exhilarating glee. "I was wondering when you'd call. I've been following the breadcrumbs in the financial news. Beaumont Mills has been leaking money for a year. Tell me, did he finally do something unforgivable?" "He tried to declare me irrelevant," I stated, the simple words carrying the full weight of his betrayal. "He and his wife. In public. They have forgotten who holds the real power. Irrelevant is a death sentence in our world, Catherine. A fate worse than bankruptcy," she replied, her understanding absolute and immediate. "How quickly can you meet?" "I'm free now," I said, a cold smile touching my lips for the first time that day. My social calendar just opened up considerably. "My office. 1 hour." Before I could agree, she asked me one final question. It was a test, a final confirmation to ensure I understood the Rubicon I was about to cross. "Are you ready to burn it all down, Catherine? There's no coming back from this." I turned and looked at my reflection in the polished surface of the grand piano across the room. The woman staring back at me was not a heartbroken mother seeking sympathy. Her shoulders were squared, her chin was lifted, and a dangerous crystalline sparkle had returned to her eyes. It was the look I used to have when I was closing a deal that would make or break my company. It was the look of a fighter. "Burn it down," I replied, my voice as cold and hard as the marble beneath my feet. "And sow the earth with salt." I hung up the phone. The decisive, final click echoed in the quiet study. On the table in the other room, my smartphone buzzed again. And again. Ethan. Calling from his office line. His panic finally setting in. How delicious. Yesterday, I was a senile old woman. Today, I was suddenly worth his desperate, undivided attention. He wanted to cut ties. Fine. I was about to hand him a pair of shears so sharp, he wouldn't even see the cut until he was already bleeding out on the boardroom floor. Was this vengeance? Or was it simply the logical consequence of his own actions? Sterling Vance's office wasn't a room. It was a declaration of war. Perched on the 50th floor of a skyscraper in the financial district, it offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor. The space was a symphony of glass, chrome, and minimalist furniture, designed for ruthless efficiency. There were no family photos, no sentimental trinkets. The only art on the wall was a framed original stock certificate from the 1929 market crash, a grim reminder of how quickly empires can fall. Sterling herself was cut from the same cloth. Dressed in a steel-gray Armani suit, with her silver hair cut in a severe, elegant bob, she moved with the contained energy of a panther. Her handshake was firm, her eyes analytical, missing nothing. "Champagne?" she asked, gesturing to a bottle of Dom Perignon chilling in a silver bucket next to her desk. "Not yet," I said, placing my heavy leather briefcase on her vast glass desk. The sound was a sharp, definitive thud in the quiet room. "Let's save the celebration for when the ink is dry on his termination papers." She gave me a sharp, appreciative nod. "Business first." "I've always admired that about you, Catherine. Show me what you have." I opened the briefcase and pulled out a binder. Not a flimsy folder. This was a 5-inch Deering binder, meticulously organized, thick enough to stop a bullet. I had nicknamed it the Ethan Project. For 3 solid years, ever since that first attempt to get power of attorney, I had been digging. He thinks I'm an analog relic in a digital world. I began, my voice low and steady as I pushed the binder across the desk. He thinks I don't understand blockchain, shell corporations, or encrypted servers. He got arrogant. He assumed my generation was too slow, too trusting. And arrogance, Sterling, always gets sloppy. Sterling opened the binder. Her perfectly manicured fingers, tipped in a deep crimson that looked like dried blood, began to turn the pages. Her expression remained impassive, but I could see the predatory gleam in her eyes as she absorbed the sheer volume of my research. She was a shark, and I had just unveiled a lavish multi-course meal. I had started small. The inflated consulting fees paid to an LLC that traced back to Jessica's maiden name. The lavish client entertainment, expenses at Michelin star restaurants on weekends. He was supposedly on family vacation in Martha's Vineyard. But then I dug deeper. I quietly hired a private forensic accountant, a retired FBI agent who owed me a significant favor from decades ago. We moved slowly, carefully. We found the primary offshore account in the Cayman Islands, the one used to siphon millions out of Beaumont Mills through a complex web of fake vendor contracts. "And this?" I said, tapping a section with a bright red tab labeled Charity. "This is Jessica's masterwork." It was a detailed breakdown of the financials for Beaumont Cares, our family's charitable foundation, or as I now called it, Jessica's personal slush fund. Donations meant for children's literacy programs in Roxbury had been used to fund her shopping sprees on Newberry Street. Money designated for local homeless shelters had paid for a $50,000 Hermes Birkin bag, which she had the audacity to claim as a necessary fundraising asset. Sterling let out a low whistle, a sound of pure professional admiration. "This isn't just embezzlement, Catherine. This is a grand symphony of felonies. Wire fraud, mail fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, breach of fiduciary duty. It's like they were trying to win a gold medal in white-collar crime." I slid one final document across the gleaming desk. It was a simple 1-page proposal. I own 49.8% of Beaumont Mills. It's the controlling interest for all practical purposes. I want to sell it all to you, Sterling. Effective immediately. But the sale comes with very specific, non-negotiable performance clauses. Her eyes, sharp as a hawk's, scanned the document. Clauses that give me the authority to launch a full-scale, no-holds-barred audit, restructure executive management, and remove anyone, and I mean anyone, found guilty of financial irregularities. She looked up, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across her face. "You don't just want him fired," she stated, her voice a purr. "You want him utterly, publicly, and professionally destroyed." "I want him to learn a lesson he should have learned 30 years ago," I corrected. "I want Jessica to discover that stealing from the wrong woman has consequences that last a lifetime." Sterling leaned back in her chair, the very picture of a predator who had just been handed the keys to the slaughterhouse. She picked up a solid gold pen from her desk. "Catherine," she said, her voice filled with a chilling excitement, "this is going to be spectacular." As she prepared to sign, a single painful thought crossed my mind. Was this justice for the company? Or was it a mother's dark, twisted final act of raising her son? That night, sleep was a stranger I had no interest in entertaining. I sat in the deep darkness of my library, a glass of untouched whiskey on the table beside me. The city lights of Boston twinkled below like a carpet of fallen stars, but their beauty offered no comfort. I was replaying 35 years of memories, searching for the exact moment the wonderful bright-eyed boy I had raised had curdled into the grasping, callous man who had betrayed me. Had I spoiled him? Had I given him too much, too easily? Or had his ambition, stoked by Jessica's insatiable greed, simply corroded whatever good I had managed to instill in him? The self-doubt was a bitter acid in my throat. It was the only thing that made me hesitate, the only thing that whispered, is it too late to turn back? Just after midnight, my personal cell phone, the one only a handful of people had the number for, rang. The screen glowed with a name that made my heart ache with a fierce protective love. Leo. My grandson. He was the one pure, untainted thing in all of this, a bright, kind 19-year-old with more integrity in his little finger than his father now possessed in his entire body. His voice, when I answered, was shaking with a mixture of anger and confusion. Grandma? Is it true? Are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. What's going on? Dad. Dad just got off a conference call with Uncle Robert and Aunt Clara. He's telling everyone you had a complete mental breakdown. He said you're delusional and that you're working with some corporate raider to destroy the family business out of pure spite. He took a shaky breath. And Mom is calling all her friends, crying, telling them that she's worried you're suffering from advanced dementia and might be a danger to yourself. The word hung in the air between us, ugly and calculated. Dementia. The same lie they had tried to use a year ago. This wasn't just a cover story. It was a full-blown character assassination. A preemptive strike designed to discredit me so that when the truth came out, no one would believe me. And what do you think, Leo? I asked, my voice softer than I intended, a remnant of the grandmother I had been yesterday. I think they're lying, he said, and the absolute conviction in his voice was a balm to my wounded soul. I was there, Grandma. I saw the text. This isn't you being spiteful. This is them being cruel. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was heavy. But they're telling everyone you never loved Dad. That you were always cold and only ever cared about money and power. That was the blow that almost broke my resolve. Not the theft. Not the betrayal. But the deliberate, malicious rewriting of history. The erasure of a lifetime of love and sacrifice. Leo, I said, my voice crystallizing, the last remnants of softness freezing into pure determination. Do you remember when you broke your arm at the summer house on Martha's Vineyard? You were 8. Yeah, he said immediately. Dad was at the golf club. Mom was at the spa. And who held your hand in the emergency room? Who stayed with you at the hospital for 3 days, sleeping in that god-awful visitor's chair? You did. His voice softened with the memory. You brought me comic books and smuggled in McDonald's fries when the nurses weren't looking. Does that sound like a woman who only cares about money and power, Leo? A long silence stretched between us. Then he said something that transformed my mission from a personal vendetta into a righteous crusade. Grandma, there's more. I did a project for my business ethics class at Boston University last semester. On corporate spending in family-owned businesses. I used Beaumont Mills as my case study. He took a deep breath. I have Dad's corporate credit card statements for the entire last year. I got them from a friend who's an intern in accounting. I wanted to see if the rumors about his spending were true. My blood ran cold. 20 minutes later, an email from Leo landed in my inbox with the subject line, Project. It was a meticulously organized spreadsheet. Luxury vacations to Aspen billed as site visits. Thousands of dollars at high-end boutiques listed as employee appreciation gifts. And then I saw it. The charge that made all the air leave my lungs. A single line item for $50,000, paid to a discreet private clinic in Zurich, Switzerland. The category, corporate restructuring consultation. I knew that clinic. They didn't consult on business. They specialized in high-level reputation management. A polite term for black ops PR firms that created and disseminated devastating smear campaigns. He had paid them with company money to professionally orchestrate and spread the mom has dementia narrative. What would you have done? I'm asking you truly. If you discovered your own child was not only stealing from you but was actively, professionally, and financially invested in destroying your sanity in the eyes of the world, where would you draw the line? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. For me, that was the moment all hesitation vanished. This was no longer about a broken heart. This was about survival. and I intended to win. The next morning, Sterling Vance descended upon the headquarters of Beaumont Mills not like a hawk, but like a silent, guided missile. Armed with the undeniable authority of my 49.8% stake and the digital smoking gun from Leo's email, she didn't just request an audit. She executed a corporate decapitation strike. She arrived with a hand-picked team of 4 of the most ruthless forensic accountants in New England. They moved with the quiet, terrifying efficiency of a special forces unit, bypassing the front desk and heading straight for the executive finance department. Within minutes, the entire floor was on lockdown. No one in, no one out. Every server was mirrored, every file cabinet sealed, every record going back 5 years demanded. The shockwave hit my phone almost immediately. My personal cell, the one I had left on the table in my study, began to vibrate with a frantic, desperate intensity. It was Ethan. Then it was his office line. Then his personal assistant. I was at my favorite salon in the Back Bay. A quiet, elegant place that smelled of lavender and expensive shampoo. I was getting a manicure. Mrs. Beaumont, my nail technician, a sweet young woman named Maria, asked timidly after the 10th call, her hand hovering over my cuticle. "Your phone, it just keeps buzzing. Are you sure you don't want to get that?" I admired the fresh coat of crimson she was painting on my nails. It was a bold, unapologetic shade. A color I had started calling victory red. "Oh no, darling, let it buzz," I said with a calm, serene smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Think of it as a very expensive, very annoying vibrator. Eventually the battery dies." She giggled, a light, innocent sound in the midst of my silent war. We went back to discussing the merits of a glossy versus a matte topcoat. Meanwhile, my other phone, a sleek burner I used exclusively for communication with Sterling, lit up with text updates that were more satisfying than any spa treatment. 10:15 a.m. Ethan is in the conference room with legal, trying to claim the offshore accounts are for strategic international tax planning. He's sweating through his $2,000 suit. 11:30 a.m. Jessica just stormed in, caused a scene in the lobby, insisted the foundation's purchase of a $50,000 diamond bracelet was a critical donor appreciation asset. The accountants are trying very hard not to laugh in her face. 12:45 p.m. We've found the wire transfer for the Swiss consultants. He didn't even bother to hide it well, just buried it under a generic code. "This is amateur hour, Catherine." He truly believed no one would ever look. The crowning moment of the morning, however, came not from Sterling, but from an unexpected and very welcome source. I received an email on my secure account from David Chan, the former chief financial officer of Beaumont Mills. David was a brilliant, meticulously honest man who had served my husband and me for 30 years. Ethan had unceremoniously fired him 6 months prior for being resistant to new agile strategies, which David later understood to mean questioning my blatant, ongoing theft. David had heard through the corporate grapevine that a full-scale audit was happening. His email was short, professional, and absolutely explosive. "Mrs. Beaumont," it read, "I am so relieved to hear that action is being taken. When Ethan terminated my employment, he had IT lock me out of the main system immediately. However, he was too arrogant and frankly, too ignorant of our protocols to realize that my security clearance still had access to the offsite server backups for a 48-hour grace period. He created the fake vendor contracts, but he wasn't smart enough to create fake work orders and receiving reports to go with them. I have copies of every single fraudulent invoice, and I can prove that not a single service was ever rendered. He also, in a fit of what I can only describe as Oedipal stupidity, used his mother's maiden name, your maiden name, as part of the password protocol for the offshore accounts. He thought it was a clever, sentimental touch. I thought it was just plain stupid. I hope this helps. It didn't just help. It was the final gleaming nail in his corporate coffin. He had underestimated everyone. His loyal employees, his razor-sharp legal adversary, and most of all, the mother who had taught him how to play the game. He thought he was a wolf, but he was just a boy playing dress-up in his father's clothes. And now the real predator was not just at the door. She was in the house. But would this mountain of evidence be enough to take him down completely? Or did he have one more desperate, dirty trick up his sleeve? Ethan's last stand was as pathetic as it was predictable. Desperate and cornered, he did what all cornered animals do. He lashed out. He called an emergency meeting of the board of directors, his intention transparently clear: to paint Sterling Vance as an outside aggressor, a corporate raider who had manipulated his ailing mother into selling her shares, all in a bid to destroy the company. He planned to rally the board, revoke Sterling's auditing authority, and seize back control. He walked into that magnificent mahogany-paneled boardroom on the top floor of the Beaumont building intending to stage a coup. Instead, he walked directly into a meticulously prepared ambush. I arrived 5 minutes after the meeting had started, a calculated delay. I wanted him to feel that fleeting, intoxicating moment of control before I personally snatched it away from him forever. I entered wearing a navy Chanel suit that was the sartorial equivalent of a battleship, complemented by my late mother's diamond earrings, which glittered like chips of ice. Sterling had invited me to attend as a special consultant on the history and legacy of the brand. The title was a beautiful piece of corporate fiction. Ethan was mid-tirade when I entered. His face, already pale and slick with sweat, turned the color of spoiled milk when he saw me. He faltered for a moment, then plowed ahead, his voice gaining a shrill, desperate edge. "This audit is nothing but a baseless witch hunt, a campaign of harassment," he shouted, his gaze darting around at the nervous-looking board members, men and women who had known me for decades. "Ms. Vance is overstepping her authority as a minority shareholder." Sterling, who had been calmly reviewing a set of documents at the head of the table, looked up without a trace of concern, a faint, amused smile playing on her lips. "Former minority shareholder Mr. Beaumont," she corrected smoothly. The air in the room instantly grew 10 degrees colder. "What are you talking about?" Ethan stammered, his bravado deflating like a punctured balloon. "While you were busy shredding documents and attempting to block my team's access to the servers yesterday," Sterling explained, her voice as crisp as a new $100 bill, "I was on the phone with your Aunt Clara and your Uncle Robert." After a brief but very illuminating conversation about the potential for personal, legal, and financial exposure for board members in cases of federal fraud investigations, they were surprisingly eager to divest themselves of their shares in the company. "As of 8 p.m. last night, I purchased their holdings. I now own 51% of Beaumont Mills." She leaned forward slightly. "This is my company now. And this is my meeting." You could have heard a pin drop on the plush, custom-woven carpet. The board members, men and women who had been loyal to Ethan out of fear, apathy, or simple greed, now looked at him as if he were a dead man walking. One of them, a man named Harrison who had known Ethan since he was a boy, let out a small squeaking sound. "Federal investigation?" "Oh yes," Sterling said, casually opening a folder on the table. "The FBI finds embezzlement from employee pension funds particularly fascinating. They consider it theft from the most vulnerable." She paused, then slid a series of documents down the polished surface of the table, fanning them out like a winning hand in a poker game. Bank statements, forged invoices, and at the very top, the beautifully clear, damning wire transfer receipt for $50,000 to the Swiss reputation management firm. "Would you like to explain this particular corporate restructuring consultation to everyone, Ethan?" Sterling asked, her voice dangerously soft. The one that coincided perfectly down to the very day, with the launch of a vicious and widespread smear campaign, alleging that your own mother, the founder of this company, suffers from debilitating dementia? Complete, suffocating silence descended. Jessica, sitting beside him in a ridiculously expensive dress likely paid for with stolen money, made a small whimpering sound, clutching her designer handbag like a flotation device on the Titanic. That was my cue. I stood up slowly, every eye in the room snapping to me. I let the full weight of my presence, of my history, of my fury settle over the room. I walked from my seat at the side of the room toward the head of the table where my son stood, trembling and exposed. My heels clicked on the marble inlay of the floor. A steady rhythmic sound. It was the sound of a clock striking midnight. It was the sound of his world ending. And what would I say when I finally reached him? I stopped directly in front of my son, close enough to see the beads of sweat on his brow, close enough to see the terror that had finally replaced the arrogance in his eyes. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The entire room was holding its breath. "When you were 7 years old, Ethan," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the chilling weight of a final judgment, You stole a box of freshly baked cookies from Mrs. Henderson's kitchen next door. And when you were caught, you looked her straight in the eye and blamed her housekeeper, Maria. A good woman, a recent immigrant, a single mother with 3 small children. She lost her job because of your lie. His face, already pale, crumpled. He looked like a boy again, a guilty, frightened boy. Mom, please, this isn't the place. This is the perfect place. I countered, my voice hardening. Because you are still that same little boy, only the stakes are much, much higher. What did I make you do back then, Ethan? Tell them. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. His voice was a choked, humiliated whisper. You made me go to Mrs. Henderson and confess. And then you made me work all summer, mowing lawns and pulling weeds, to pay back the wages Maria had lost because of me. Exactly, I said, turning my gaze to the stunned faces around the table. Actions have consequences. Always. It is the most fundamental lesson of business, and the most fundamental lesson of life. It is a lesson my son has apparently forgotten. It is a lesson that his wife, and here my eyes fell on Jessica, who visibly flinched, has actively helped him to forget. I looked at the board. You have all sat by and watched as he has systematically dismantled the ethical foundation of this company. You have watched as he has fired loyal employees, plundered pension funds, and treated our charitable foundation like his personal ATM. Your silence was your complicity. Sterling, with the timing of a seasoned theater director, chose that moment to consult a legal pad. Ethan Beaumont, she announced, her voice ringing with finality. By a majority shareholder vote of 51%, you are hereby terminated from all positions within Beaumont Mills, effective immediately. Your corporate accounts are frozen, your keycard has been deactivated, and your access to all company servers and properties has been revoked. Security will now escort you from the building. You can't do this to me. Ethan finally roared, a last desperate flash of his entitled arrogance returning. This is my company. Actually, Sterling purred, her smile as sharp as a razor. It was your mother's company. Now it's mine. And I am doing this. She then turned her cool gaze to Jessica. Jessica Beaumont, as you are not an employee, you are simply a guest. And your invitation has expired. You are banned from all company properties pending the outcome of the federal investigation into the fraudulent use of the Beaumont Cares Foundation. It was Jessica who finally found her voice, a shrill, desperate cry that was a pathetic imitation of her usual poise. Catherine, after everything we've done for you, you're destroying your own family. I looked at this woman, this vapid, grasping woman who had laughed at my pain, who had worn stolen charity money on her wrist, who had encouraged my son to commit the ultimate betrayal. This woman, now invoking the sacred word family, because her gilded cage was about to be dismantled. I reached up and slowly, deliberately, adjusted my mother's diamond earrings. Darling, I said, my voice dripping with a calm, lethal condescension she could finally understand. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply taking out the trash. As if summoned by magic, 2 uniformed security guards entered the room. They were large, impassive men who moved with professional detachment. One stood by my son, the other by his wife. The remaining board members watched in stunned, motionless silence as Ethan and Jessica were escorted out of the room they had once commanded, their faces a grotesque mixture of shock, humiliation, and utter defeat. Through the vast boardroom window, I watched them emerge onto the street far below, looking small, lost, and pathetically insignificant against the backdrop of the city. Justice, I decided, wasn't just sweet. It was absolutely delicious. The battle was won decisively. But was the war truly over? Or was there another, more insidious front I hadn't yet anticipated? The boardroom coup was a silent, surgical strike, a private execution witnessed by a select few. But I knew that for true justice to be served, for the soul of Beaumont Mills to be truly cleansed, the truth had to be brought into the light of day. I didn't have to wait long for the reinforcements I needed. In the days that followed, the allies I didn't even know I had began to emerge from the shadows where Ethan's tyrannical reign of greed and incompetence had pushed them. It started with a call from Leo, his voice buzzing with an excitement I hadn't heard in years. Grandma, you won't believe this. David Chan, the old CFO? He just contacted me on LinkedIn. He heard what happened. He and 3 other senior managers that Dad fired over the last year want to thank you. They're calling it the Great Liberation in their group chat. A small genuine smile touched my lips. What else are they saying, Leo? I asked, settling into my favorite armchair with a cup of tea, the afternoon sun warming my face. Everything, Grandma. They're confirming everything you suspected and more. They said Dad was hemorrhaging the company's cash reserves, laying off loyal mid-level employees with families to cut costs, all while giving himself and his executive cronies massive seven-figure bonuses. They said Jess's charity work was a running joke in the accounting department. She was funding luxury spa weekends for her friends and calling them donor wellness retreats, all while cutting the actual after-school literacy programs the foundation was created to support. It was one thing to see the numbers on a spreadsheet, to know about the theft in an abstract financial sense. It was another thing entirely to hear about the human cost, the collateral damage of their insatiable greed. This was no longer just about my personal betrayal, as deep and painful as that was. This was about the legacy my husband and I had built. A company that was supposed to care for its employees, not prey on them. Leo, I said, an idea forming clear and bright in my mind. I want you to do something for me. Invite Mr. Chan and the others to lunch. Somewhere very nice. The private dining room at the Four Seasons. My treat. Are you building an alliance, Grandma? He asked, a hint of awe and admiration in his voice. I'm building something better, sweetheart, I replied, my voice firm with a newfound purpose. I'm building a testament. I'm building proof that we were right. The lunch was both illuminating and heartbreaking. Seated around the table were David Chan and three sharp, capable women, the former heads of human resources, marketing, and operations. These were seasoned professionals with a combined century of experience, all of whom looked haggard and worn down from the stress of working under Ethan. Mrs. Beaumont, said Janet Morrison, the former head of HR, her eyes filled with a weary, lingering sadness. We have to be honest. We thought you knew. We thought you approved of the layoffs, the cuts to the pension fund contributions. We tried to raise the alarm through the official channels. What happened when you did? I asked gently, though I already suspected the answer. It was David who spoke, his voice heavy with remembered frustration. Ethan told us you wouldn't listen. He told the entire senior staff that you had moved into a private assisted living facility up in New Hampshire. He said that you were having significant cognitive decline, that you couldn't handle the stress of business decisions anymore, and that's why he had to be given full, unilateral control of all operations. He made us believe you were incapacitated. The teacup in my hand trembled, a small violent tremor. The elegant room with its fine china and hushed atmosphere suddenly felt suffocating. My own son. He hadn't just lied to our family about my mental state. He had declared me mentally incompetent to his entire senior staff, to the very people entrusted with the care of my company, all to justify his breathtaking crimes. He had locked me in a prison of lies, not only to steal from me, but from every single person who had placed their trust and their future in Beaumont Mills. I set my cup down with surgical precision. I looked into the faces of these four loyal, talented people whose careers and reputations had been damaged by my son's greed and deceit. Ladies, David, I said, my voice ringing with a purpose as clear and hard as a diamond, would you like to help me ensure that justice is properly and publicly served? Their eager, determined nods confirmed what I already knew. Ethan and Jessica hadn't just made an enemy of me. They had created an entire, hidden army of people praying for their downfall, and I was about to give them their wish. Did I have the strength to see this through to its ugly, public, and very necessary end? If the boardroom meeting was a quiet, private execution, the emergency shareholder meeting held 1 week later was a public hanging in the town square. I didn't want this to be a sterile corporate affair. I wanted it to be a reckoning. I booked the largest conference hall at the Boston Convention Center, and through Sterling's office, sent out an invitation not just to shareholders, but to all employees, current and former, and to the press. The Wall Street Journal, the Boston Globe, CNBC, Bloomberg. They all came, smelling blood in the water. I chose a seat in the front row. I wore a bespoke dress in a deep, unapologetic shade of crimson, and a smile that felt as if it could cut glass. Ethan was compelled to attend by a shareholder subpoena. He sat across the aisle from me, flanked by a team of high-priced lawyers, looking like a ghost. He had lost weight, and his expensive suit hung on his frame. He had aged 20 years in 10 days. Jessica, I was told, had refused to attend, her lawyer wisely advising her against facing the public furnace after the federal indictment against her and Ethan had been officially filed and leaked to the press that morning. Sterling commanded the podium like a five-star general briefing her troops before a final, decisive battle. Her voice, amplified by the sound system, was calm, precise, and utterly devastating. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, as a hush fell over the cavernous hall, "we are here today to discuss the future of Beaumont Mills. But before we can build a new future, we must first fully understand and publicly account for the sins of the past. Today's presentation concerns the systematic embezzlement of over $8.3 million from Beaumont Mills by former CEO Ethan Beaumont and his wife, Jessica Beaumont." The massive screens flanking the stage lit up. Bank transfers, forged documents, scanned copies of the fake vendor contracts, email chains where Ethan and his cronies discussed their creative accounting methods. Then came Sterling's masterstroke. She began to display a meticulously prepared slideshow that paired the cold, hard evidence of their financial crimes with their own proud, boastful social media posts. A slide appeared showing a $200,000 wire transfer from the employee pension fund to an offshore account. Next to it, an Instagram photo Ethan had posted that very weekend. Him on a magnificent yacht in St. Bart's, champagne flute in hand. The caption read, "Hard work pays off. #blessed #Salif." A low, angry murmur rippled through the audience. I could see former employees, people who had lost their jobs, staring at the screen with expressions of pure, unadulterated fury. Another slide. A $50,000 payment from the Beaumont Cares Children's Literacy Fund to a high-end Parisian boutique. Next to it, a photo from a society blog of Jessica at a charity gala, wearing a stunning couture gown and holding the very Hermes handbag purchased with that money. The caption quoted her as saying, "It's all about fighting for the kids. #philanthropy." The murmur in the room grew into a low roar of outrage. The journalists in the press section were typing with a furious intensity. This wasn't just a story about corporate greed anymore. It was a story of breathtaking hypocrisy and moral bankruptcy. Most egregiously, Sterling continued, her voice dripping with cold contempt as she clicked to the final damning slide. At the exact same time Mr. Beaumont was approving a round of layoffs for 57 employees due to unavoidable budgetary shortfalls, he approved a 40% salary increase for himself. The room erupted. Shouts of "Thief!" and "Shame on you!" rained down on Ethan, who had slumped so low in his chair he seemed to be physically dissolving under the weight of his public disgrace. Then I stood up. As if a switch had been flipped, the entire hall fell silent. Every eye, every camera was on me. I walked to the podium and Sterling, with a small, gracious nod, stepped aside. This was my moment. The culmination of a lifetime of work, of love, of betrayal and of reclamation. I looked directly at the broken man who was my son. "Ethan," I said, my voice clear and strong, carrying to every corner of the vast hall without the need for a microphone. "Stand up." He rose shakily, his lawyer having to help him to his feet. "You told people I had dementia," I stated, letting the ugly words hang in the air. "You told them I was incompetent. You erased me from this company's history, and you tried to erase me from my own life." The silence was so profound, so complete, that you could hear the soft weeping of a woman in the back row who had lost her job. "But you forgot something, Ethan. You forgot who taught you everything you know about business, about ethics, about the simple, immutable difference between right and wrong." I paused, letting the truth of it, the terrible, tragic truth of it, sink in. "Today you remember." I then turned to the audience, my voice ringing with a strength I didn't know I still possessed. Beaumont Mills will survive. And it will be stronger than ever. Every stolen dollar will be returned to the pension funds and the charities from which they were taken. Every employee who was wrongfully terminated will be offered their job back, with full back pay and benefits. A wave of applause, raw and emotional, erupted from the employee section. As for my son, the criminal justice system would handle him now. I had done my part. The empire was secure. But as I looked at his shattered face for the first time, a sliver of a question entered my mind. Had I gone too far? Just when I believed the worst was over, that the public humiliation would be the final chapter in this sordid tale, a new level of audacious absurdity emerged. Ethan and Jessica, now facing a mountain of federal charges and public scorn, launched their final, pathetic, and frankly comical counterattack. Their newly hired, notoriously aggressive lawyer filed a multi-million-dollar civil suit against me and Sterling Vance. The grounds? Elder manipulation, conspiracy, and coercive influence. Sterling called me from her car, and I could hear her trying to stifle her laughter. She was failing miserably. "Catherine, you have to see this. It's a work of pure, unadulterated comic genius. I'm having it framed for my office." "What are they possibly claiming now, Sterling?" I asked, a weary sigh escaping my lips. "Get this," she said, finally giving in to a full-throated laugh. "They're officially claiming in a court of law that you have a severely diminished mental state due to advanced dementia." I nearly choked on my morning cup of Earl Grey. They're using the same lie he invented to justify his theft as their legal defense? "The very same," she cackled. "It's brilliant in its stupidity. Their entire legal strategy is that you are simultaneously too mentally incompetent to have legally sold me your shares, and yet somehow you were also the diabolical criminal mastermind who orchestrated their entire prosecution. It's a legal Schrodinger's cat of idiocy. You are both a frail victim and a Machiavellian genius at the same time." Got even better. They claimed that the initial text message cutting me off from the family had placed me under such extreme and unbearable psychological duress that I was not of sound mind when I signed the contract with Sterling less than an hour later. Apparently, being uninvited to Sunday dinner was grounds for a complete mental breakdown and constituted temporary insanity. If you are still with me on this crazy journey, I want to thank you for your patience and for listening. This is the point where the story goes from tragic to truly unbelievable. If you've been watching this far, do me a quick favor and comment the number 1 down below so I know you're still here with me. It means the world. I put down my teacup and looked out over the Boston Common. This wasn't a legitimate legal maneuver. This was a public relations stunt. It was a final desperate attempt to humiliate me, to throw enough mud in the hopes that some of it would stick, to cement the narrative that I was nothing more than a frail, confused, and vindictive old woman. "Sterling," I said, a cold, hard fire igniting within me, "cancel my afternoon appointments and schedule a press conference this afternoon on the front steps of the Beaumont building." "What's your angle?" she asked, the laughter in her voice instantly replaced by keen, professional interest. "My angle," I replied, a small, dangerous smile touching my lips. "If they want to claim I'm a confused old woman, let's give them a public demonstration of exactly how confused I am." 2 hours later, I stood on the granite steps of the building that bore my family's name. A throng of reporters and television cameras were assembled before me. I wore my sharpest Armani suit, a string of pearls, and a smile that could intimidate a Supreme Court justice. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice steady and clear, carrying effortlessly over the clicks and flashes of the cameras. "I'm here to address the recent and, I must say, rather creative legal filings made by individuals currently under federal investigation for embezzlement, wire fraud, and a host of other serious financial crimes." I held up a perfectly bound copy of my binder, The Ethan Project, its 5-inch spine a testament to my lucidity. "These," I announced, my voice ringing with authority, "are the financial records, transaction histories, and recorded conversations I personally compiled over a period of 3 years, documenting the systematic theft from Beaumont Mills. This evidence was all collected through my allegedly diminished mental capacity." A ripple of appreciative laughter went through the press corps. I had them. This wasn't just a defense anymore. This was a masterclass in public relations. But would this final public rebuttal be enough to silence them for good? Or would they find another way to drag my name through the mud? The press conference was a resounding success. It was the lead story on every local news channel and was picked up by the national business press. The headline in the Boston Globe the next morning read, "Beaumont matriarch to son, checkmate." The ridiculous lawsuit was laughed out of the court of public opinion before it ever saw a judge, and it was quietly and unceremoniously dropped by Ethan's lawyers a week later. They cited a desire to focus on the more pressing federal matters. With the last of the legal nonsense behind us, it was time to rebuild. At the next official meeting of the board of directors, Sterling Vance, as the undisputed majority shareholder, made her first and most important order of business. "I nominate Catherine Beaumont as the new chairman of the board of Beaumont Mills," she declared, her voice ringing with authority. The vote was swift and unanimous. The prodigal mother had returned. I walked into that boardroom for the first time not as a guest, a consultant, or a victim, but as its leader. The woman who entered that room was nothing like the one Ethan had so carelessly dismissed just 6 weeks earlier. I wore my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one I had worn on the morning of the infamous text. Back then it had felt like a fragile link to a more gracious past. Today it felt like a suit of armor. The new board was a carefully selected mix of trusted old allies who had weathered the storm and sharp new minds handpicked by Sterling for their expertise and ethical track records. They listened with rapt attention as I outlined our new direction, which I called the Beaumont Restoration. "Our new corporate philosophy is simple, ladies and gentlemen," I stated, my voice resonating with a passion I hadn't felt in years. "Integrity is not a line item in our mission statement. It is our single greatest asset. From this day forward, we will be transparent, we will be accountable, and we will be profitable because we are ethical, not in spite of it." The changes were implemented with lightning speed. David Chun was reinstated as Chief Financial Officer, with expanded oversight powers and a direct line to me. Janet Morrison returned to Human Resources with a mandate to restore employee benefits, replenish the pension fund, and create a corporate culture where speaking truth to power was rewarded, not punished. Every single one of the 57 employees Ethan had wrongfully terminated was contacted and offered their job back, with a formal apology from the company and full back pay. The results were immediate and astounding. At our first quarterly review under the new leadership, Sterling presented the figures with a triumphant smile. Employee morale, as measured by our internal surveys, is at a 5-year high. Voluntary turnover has plummeted by 60%. And perhaps most telling, we've attracted 3 major national clients who had previously refused to work with us under Ethan's management, citing serious ethical and reputational concerns. Board member Harrison, a man who had once cowered before Ethan, raised his hand. "Mrs. Wilson, I mean Madam Chairman," he said, his voice filled with a genuine newfound respect. "How do you feel about about this incredible transformation?" I considered the question carefully. I looked around the table at the faces of my new team, faces that now showed admiration and loyalty instead of the pity or thinly veiled dismissal I had endured for so long under my own son's reign. 6 weeks ago," I said, my voice carrying across the room with a quiet, steely authority, "I was told I was dead weight. I was uninvited from my own family dinner. I was dismissed as irrelevant. Today, I am the chairman of a $300 million company. I am the star witness in a major federal criminal case. And apparently," I added with a small dry smile, "I am trending on social media as an inspiration to businesswomen everywhere." Light, appreciative laughter rippled through the room. "The transformation isn't just mine," I concluded, my gaze firm. "It is institutional. Ethan led through fear, intimidation, and deception. We will lead through transparency, collaboration, and earned respect." My life had been turned upside down and inside out, but in the heart of the chaos, I had found a strength I didn't know I still possessed. I had my company back. But as I looked out the window at the sprawling city I had helped to build, I had to wonder, what had it truly cost me in the end? 3 months later, I found myself standing on a brightly lit stage in New York City, the iconic silhouette of the Lincoln Center behind me. The air was electric. I was accepting the National Corporate Integrity Award on behalf of Beaumont Mills. The applause from the assembled audience of CEOs, journalists, and business school academics was a thunderous rolling wave of validation. I walked to the podium, the heavy crystal award in my hand. I was wearing a navy Armani gown, elegant and severe, and the same pearl necklace, which the media had now dubbed my symbol of resilience. In the front row I could see Leo, his face alight with a pride that brought tears to my eyes. Beside him sat Sterling, ever the professional, recording the moment on her phone with a small triumphant smile. 3 months earlier, I had been dismissed as dead weight. Tonight, I was being celebrated as a model of corporate courage. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady and clear, carrying easily through the grand auditorium. "I am deeply honored to accept this award. 7 months ago, the company that bears my family's name was on the brink of moral and financial collapse. It had been poisoned from the inside by a culture of greed, secrecy, and profound disrespect for the very people who made it great. I paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. Today, I am proud to report that every stolen dollar has been recovered and returned to its rightful place in our employee pension funds and our charitable foundations. Every broken promise has been made whole. The applause intensified, strong and sustained. But this award isn't just about exposing corruption, I continued, holding up the heavy crystal trophy so it caught the light. It's about proving, in a world that is often cynical, that businesses built on a foundation of integrity don't just survive, they thrive. Since implementing radically transparent governance practices, Beaumont Mills has attracted new clients, retained our most valuable employees, and increased both our profitability and our positive social impact. We are proving that doing right and doing well can, and should be, the very same thing. I shared the recognition with the employees who had kept their integrity despite corrupt leadership, with the board members who had supported transparency over convenience, and with every stakeholder who believed that businesses can and should be a force for good in the world. The standing ovation that followed lasted 3 full minutes. As the applause washed over me, I thought about the incredible journey from the quiet humiliation of that text message to this moment of public vindication. After the ceremony, I was surrounded. A documentary filmmaker from a major streaming service wanted to tell my story. 3 different publishing houses wanted to offer me a book deal. The dean of Harvard Business School, my alma mater, personally invited me to deliver their commencement address in the spring. A young, sharp-eyed correspondent from CNN pushed a microphone toward me, her expression a mixture of curiosity and admiration. "Mrs. Beaumont," she asked, "what would you say to other family businesses, other founders who might be facing similar corruption from within?" "I would say that loyalty to family does not, and must not, require tolerance for criminal behavior," I answered without a moment's hesitation. Sometimes the most loving, most responsible thing you can do is hold the people you care about accountable for their choices. Actions have consequences. Always. Another reporter from the Wall Street Journal called out from the crowd, "Do you have any regrets about exposing your own son's crimes? About the personal cost?" The question hung in the air. The bright lights felt hotter. The smiling faces around me seemed to freeze. It was the question I had been asking myself in the quiet hours of the night. For the first time, I allowed myself to truly, honestly consider it. I had won the war, rebuilt my empire, and restored my name. But what had I lost in the process? I knew the world was listening for my answer. "Do I have any regrets?" I repeated the reporter's question, my voice dropping slightly, drawing the chaotic scrum of journalists into a focused silence. I looked past the cameras, past the bright, blinding lights, and for a fleeting, painful moment, I pictured Ethan's face. Not the sneering, arrogant man who had stolen from his own employees, nor the broken, defeated shell of a man in the boardroom. I pictured the little boy with scraped knees and a mischievous grin who used to hold my hand so tightly, as if I were the only anchor in his entire world. A wave of profound sadness, sharp and unexpected, washed over me. It was the grief I hadn't allowed myself to feel. The mourning for a son who was still alive but was lost to me forever. I took a deep breath, and when I spoke, my voice was clear and unwavering, forged in the fire of that grief. "My only regret," I said, looking directly into the camera lens, speaking not just to the reporter but to anyone out there who had ever faced an impossible choice, "is that I didn't act sooner. Every single day I hesitated, every day I clung to the fading hope that I was wrong, that it was all a misunderstanding, was another day that my employees' retirement funds were being plundered. It was another day that donations meant for sick children and homeless veterans were being diverted to fund a lifestyle of grotesque, empty luxury. It was another day that corruption was being allowed to fester in the heart of the company my husband and I poured our lives into building." I paused, letting the weight of my confession settle. I regret that I allowed my love for the son I thought I had, for the memory of that little boy, to delay justice for the man he had actually become. My love made me patient. It should have made me brave. That is my only regret. Later that evening, at the exclusive reception held in my honor, Leo found me on a quiet terrace overlooking the glittering, indifferent expanse of Manhattan. The noise of the party, the clinking glasses and forced laughter, faded into a distant murmur. "Grandma," he said quietly, coming to stand beside me at the railing. You're famous now. I'm vindicated, sweetheart. I corrected gently, placing my hand over his. There's a very important difference. He stood beside me, a handsome, serious young man with my late husband's kind eyes and a strength that was all his own. Are you happy? He asked, his voice full of a genuine, tender concern that almost broke my heart. It was the simplest and most complex question anyone could ask. Was I happy? Happiness seemed like such a simple, fleeting emotion. What I felt was deeper, more foundational. I watched the streams of traffic flowing like rivers of light on the streets far below. I'm at peace, Leo, I said, and the truth of the words resonated deep within my soul, a calm, clear note after a symphony of chaos. For the first time in many years, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm meant to do. I turned and smiled at this incredible young man who had been my North Star through the entire ordeal. And yes, I admitted, the word feeling both strange and wonderful on my tongue. That makes me deeply happy. The ultimate irony was not lost on me. Ethan had tried to destroy my reputation. Instead, he had made me a national symbol of corporate courage and female empowerment. Jessica had tried to erase my legacy. Instead, she had inadvertently helped me build something more meaningful and lasting than anything that had come before. Sometimes justice doesn't just restore what was taken. Sometimes it gives you back something infinitely better than what you lost. I had lost a son, it was true, and that wound would always remain. But in the process I had found myself again. Was this the end of the story? Or was it the beginning of a powerful, unexpected new chapter? 6 months later, the chaotic storm had subsided, leaving behind a new landscape, one filled with a quiet, purposeful rhythm. I sold the large, echoing brownstone in Beacon Hill. It was a beautiful house, but it was filled with too many ghosts, too many memories of a family that no longer existed. I now live in a modern, light-filled loft in the Seaport District, surrounded by contemporary art instead of heavy antiques, with a sweeping panoramic view of the harbor. My life is no longer about fighting nightmares, it's about funding dreams. Beaumont Mills, under the steady, ethical hand of David Chun as the new CEO, is thriving in ways I had only dreamed of. Our stock is up 30%, but more importantly, we are now recognized internationally as a model of stakeholder capitalism, a company that proves you can be both profitable and principled. But my true passion project, my life's third act, is the revitalized Beaumont Foundation. I had it completely restructured from the ground up. It is no longer a passive entity for my family to claim tax write-offs, but an active, dynamic incubator for change. We no longer just write checks. We provide startup capital, intensive mentorship, and a network of support to female entrepreneurs from low-income and underserved communities who want to build ethical, sustainable businesses. The very money that Jessica once stole to buy designer handbags now purchases educational opportunities and seed funding for the next generation of female leaders. The circularity of that justice is a constant, quiet source of profound satisfaction. Leo is my right-hand man at the foundation, taking a semester off from his studies at BU to work as our head intern. He has found his calling. He arrives at my loft every Saturday with coffee and croissants from a small local bakery, and we spend the morning going over applications and business plans. He possesses more business acumen and innate integrity at 19 than his father ever managed to acquire in a lifetime of privilege. "Grandma," he said last weekend, pulling a stack of well-researched papers from his backpack, "Professor Martinez at the business school wants to do a feature interview with you for his new book on ethical leadership. He says your story is the new gold standard." Also, we've had 15 other family-owned businesses contact the foundation this month, asking for guidance on how to implement transparent governance practices in their own companies. He grinned, a wide, genuine smile that lit up his face. Who knew that exposing your own son's heinous crimes would become a viable and very popular business model? I laughed, a real unburdened laugh, as I signed an approval letter that would change a brilliant young woman's life forever. "Speaking of business models," I said, "Sterling wants to formalize our consulting partnership. Apparently, there's a high demand across the country for the Catherine Beaumont treatment for deep-seated corporate corruption." My phone buzzed with a text from Sterling. It was a screenshot of an email from Netflix. Project greenlit. Working title: The Matriarch, The Catherine Beaumont Story. Production begins next month. Ethan had tried to make me disappear into the fog of senility. Instead, he had made me unforgettable. I looked at Leo, my heart swelling with a love that felt pure and uncomplicated. "Do you ever wonder what your father is doing now?" I asked, my voice gentle. His expression grew serious, his youthful face clouding over. "Actually," he said quietly, avoiding my eyes, "I saw him last week. On the street downtown. He's working as a junior-level financial analyst at some small no-name firm. He looked smaller. That's the only word for it. Like he'd shrunk." He shook his head, a gesture of sad disbelief. "And Mom? She divorced him 2 months ago, as soon as it was clear all the money was really gone. She took the kids and moved to Los Angeles. She's trying to become a lifestyle influencer, teaching people about authentic living, while using a fake name to hide her criminal record, and the fact that she's facing probation." I felt something unexpected then. Not a jolt of pleasure, not a flicker of vengeful glee, just a profound, peaceful, and utterly complete indifference. The two people who had once held the power to shatter my world with a single text message had become irrelevant footnotes in a story that was no longer about them at all. Was it truly possible to heal so completely that your deepest wounds no longer even ached? "Do you miss them?" Leo asked, his voice gentle and perceptive, as if he could sense the complex shift in my emotions. I considered his question for a long, honest moment. I watched a container ship glide silently out of the harbor, heading toward the vast open sea. "I miss who I thought they were," I said, the words feeling true and precise. "I miss the son I believed I had raised, the smart, funny, ambitious boy who I thought had a good heart. And I miss the family I imagined we could be, the one I saw in my dreams during all those years of hard work." I turned my gaze from the window to look at this wonderful young man who was my true legacy, the living proof that my family's values had not died out completely. But I don't miss the reality of who they actually were. I don't miss the lies, the anxiety, the constant draining feeling of being managed, dismissed, and taken for granted. The following Monday afternoon, as I was reviewing a promising new business proposal, Sterling called. "I have some interesting news," she said, a curious, unreadable tone in her voice. "Ethan called my office today. He didn't ask for money. He asked for a meeting. With you." "What does he want?" I asked, feeling no jolt of anxiety, no flicker of anger, only a distant clinical curiosity. "To apologize, apparently," Sterling said, sounding skeptical. "He wants to," and I quote, "begin the long process of making amends for his unforgivable behavior." I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the city skyline. After months of complete silence, after the trial where he refused to make eye contact, after the public disgrace and the quiet ruin of his life, my son wanted reconciliation. Not, I suspected, because he had found a moral compass or discovered the value of integrity, but because he had finally truly hit rock bottom and realized that the only person in the world who might ever show him a shred of grace was the mother he had so thoroughly tried to destroy. "What should I tell him?" Sterling asked, her voice neutral, leaving the decision entirely in my hands. A genuine, peaceful smile touched my lips. "Tell him I'm busy," I said, my voice calm and certain. "Tell him I'm busy building something beautiful out of the wreckage he left behind. Tell him that if he truly wants to be part of something meaningful, if he wants to begin the long process of making amends, he can start by applying for an entry-level, unpaid volunteer position at the foundation just like any other candidate. No special treatment. His application, if he chooses to submit one, will be reviewed on its merits." I could hear the smile in Sterling's voice. "And if he does? If he actually goes through with it and shows some genuine change? If he demonstrates real, sustained remorse over a very long period of time," I replied, "then we might consider giving him a chance to earn forgiveness. And if he doesn't, then he will remain exactly what he chose to become. A stranger with a familiar face, completely and utterly irrelevant to my story." That night, I sat on my terrace with a glass of good wine, reading thank you letters from scholarship recipients whose lives had been transformed. My phone displayed 17 missed calls from an unknown number. I knew who it was. I deleted them without listening, and then I blocked the number. Some relationships can be rebuilt through forgiveness, hard work, and mutual growth. Others simply end when people reveal unequivocally who they truly are. The ultimate wisdom I've learned: is knowing the difference and having the strength to act accordingly. Thank you so much for listening to my story. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so powerful, so peaceful, and so purposeful in your own right that their opinions become irrelevant, their actions become inconsequential, and their absence becomes a gift rather than a loss. In the quiet of my new life, surrounded by purpose instead of pain, I finally understood what true victory looked like. It looked like peace. If you've made it to the very end of this long journey with me, please hit that like button. Truly helps more than you know. And more importantly, if you have ever had to cut ties with someone you loved in order to protect your own peace and sanity, please consider sharing a piece of your experience in the comments below. You are not alone and your story matters.